Hey everyone, man, it's awesome to see so many people here. Awesome. So, hey, just so I get an idea, how many of you guys have started a tech company or are thinking about starting a technology company? Just so I kind of know who's in the audience. Okay, cool. What I was going to talk about, I was just going to start by sharing the Posse journey, and then I'm going to go through a few lessons, just key lessons that I learned along the way. Not everything. If I went through every lesson, I'd be here all night, but I was going to focus on stuff that I thought might be most relevant for you. So how as a non-tech founder, I built a technology team, how we developed our strategy, and like how we just developed our product, also capital raising, and then I was going to end on the unique challenges that we face being a woman in this environment. So first up, the Posse story. Prior to starting Posse, this is my second business. I had a band management business actually. So we were one of the largest. I built that straight out of university over 8 years, and we became one of the largest band management companies in Australia. And then I got to a point in my career where I decided that I'd learned everything I could learn in that industry, and I wanted to do something else. So that I took a massive leap backwards to square one and decided to start a tech company with no technical experience and really no idea how to raise capital or do anything. So, and also that was 2010, so I've been going for a little while, and I think also back then there was very few events like this. There was a very small community, and so I didn't really have the opportunity to learn that much. And so I just went out there and made every single mistake that I possibly could. So it's good for talking at events like this because there's lots of stuff that I learned. It's not, yeah. So this has been my journey over the last 4 years. So I started Posse back here, and this is kind of, I graphed it based on my happiness. So at the top, you'll see that I was really happy and optimistic, and at the bottom, this is like the very worst, down and depressed. So when I started out, I was very optimistic. I didn't come to these events. I'd seen the Social Network movie, and that was really all I knew about tech startups. So I thought this is going to be awesome. I had no idea that I might ever fail. I raised a little bit of money from friends, built a product, and it didn't quite work as I hoped it would. It worked a little bit, but it didn't work as I expected. So this is 2011, realizing that it didn't work. Then I redesigned the strategy here in about 2012. Started to feel a little bit more optimistic. I raised some money, about $3 million up there, so that was feeling good. Then I ran out of money, and the site still wasn't really working, and that was terrible. And I remember one point, which I was telling Nikki about a few weeks ago, where I was just in the park crying, and I had an investor meeting to go to straight afterwards, and I just knew that we were about to run out of money, and I had to let go of staff, and it was just awful. So that was the lowest moment. Then just managed to keep going and building, and we made progress slowly over that time because we had so few people and no one was motivated, but I did manage to pull together another funding round of $2 million, and then the product started to break through actually quite recently, and then we've actually started making money. So when you're making your like revenue, it feels so much better than raising capital. So that's, I guess, been my journey over the last 4 years. So I'm going to go into a few of the key lessons that I learned and a little bit about the story. So the first thing was, when I first came up with the idea, originally it was an idea of music. It was an idea as I don't know if any of you know the background of the business, but originally Posse was a site that helped bands connect with fans. It was a two-sided network of bands and fans, and the fans helped the bands sell tickets. And that was my background, and that was the idea. So the first thing I did was to go out and buy the domain name, posse.com. It was crazy because I spent $28,000 on it in the middle of the night on an auction site. But I just thought it was a really cool name, and I thought we were going to do the next Facebook, so I thought it would be worth it. And I remember at the time, I was going to buy a house, and I had to call my mum the next morning and say, "Mum, I can't buy that house anymore because I just spent $28,000 on this domain name." And she was like, "What's a domain name?" And she said, "Can you live in a domain name?" And I was like, "No, kind of, but not really." Anyway, it has actually turned out to be, even though it was nuts, it has turned out to be a great asset because when I went out to raise capital, recruit people, it just sounded like it was going to be a big business from the beginning. And it also was a flexible name. It wasn't, ticketpromoter.com or something. So we were able to take the brand from, I guess, idea to idea. The next thing I did was I just started running a plan. So I think most businesses fail in the first 6 months just because they don't get started. So you end up spending time going to conferences, reading books, trying to figure out all the things that you should do, and you just don't start. So I think the key thing for me was I just got an Excel spreadsheet and I made a really basic financial model and a Microsoft Word document, and I wrote out where do I want to be in 5 years' time, in 6 months' time, in 3 months' time, and I was able to articulate what I was going to do to other people as well as myself. So I think just making that very basic plan was a key step in getting started. Then I signed up our first partners. So I went out and I met Ticketmaster and Mosh6 and Oztix. I just had friends in the business and I was able to sign them up just with some wireframes and a very basic design. I sold it to them as if this was happening and we were about to go live, even though it was just a friend helping mock up the pictures the night before. But luckily I was able to, it was a good way of testing the product to see whether there was interest. And because I was able to sign them up to a deal, that it kind of helped me make the next stage. And then lastly, I built this minimum viable product. And as a tech founder, non-tech founder, building a tech business, it's terrifying knowing how to build a website or any kind of product. And I went to an outsourced development company. It was a disaster. I ended up probably getting pretty ripped off, and we threw out the technology. But the good thing was I just got going. So it helped me get minimum viable product live, and I just was able to prove that there was some legs in this idea and it did work. So the next thing was we went live. So by this stage we had a little bit of money just from friends and some of my own money. We put the site live. I hired a couple of our own developers. We did pretty well actually. We did about $2 million worth of sales in the first 18 months, but the sales model didn't work. So I discovered that it was a really long time to sign up every band or festival. And then the amount of money that we made, even though the gross revenue was high, our cut was very small. And then also the clients, which were bands and festivals, were really bad at paying us. So I just knew that even though there was something in the model, like parts of it were working, it just wasn't going to be a scalable business for us. It certainly wasn't going to be the next Facebook. So luckily, I was able to sell that business to our biggest client, which was Future Music. They had a big community on the product. They were using it by this stage to promote all of their festivals. And then they wanted it under their own brand. So we sold the software, the community, and one of the team members, and they still run that business under the name futurefans.com.au today. We kept the brand, and then I went back to the original investors and said, hey, we've got a little bit of money, we've lost money, but we've still got something because we sold it. But I've got this idea to take a lot of the principles and the brand and actually do the same thing in a much bigger market, which is shopping. And so, they were all very supportive and they liked the idea, so they stuck with me and we went out and redesigned the strategy to build, I guess, Posse Mark II in a very different industry. There was a lot of things I did differently the second time around, and one of them was I spent a lot of time thinking about the strategy before I designed the product. So first time around, I just thought, hey, this is this great idea, I'm solving this problem, let's just do it. Whereas the second time around, I ran focus groups for 3 months, every day, twice a day. So, and it was 2 people per group. So I literally just went through friends of friends. I got these 2 people together in the morning, 2 people together in the afternoon, and I just asked them lots of questions. So I really got to the bottom of what is the problem that we're solving, and then what are some principles that will be kind of underlie our product that we will know that that we can build a product on top of. So just to give you one example, we wanted to solve the problem of social search, being able to find places around you that have been recommended by your friends. And the only way we were ever going to be able to do that was if we could figure out how to get everyone to actually make lots of recommendations on the platform. Because if people weren't making recommendations, then you weren't even going to be able to search your friends' recommendations. And so I started asking people in these focus groups, tell me about, why do you like recommending places to your friends? And they would always say, oh, I just want my friend to have a good experience. And it kind of sounded like not true. And so I started asking them questions like, recommend some places to me. What are some places, like, tell me about your last holiday, what are some places that you discovered? And it was really obvious, you know, their eyes would light up and they'd spend an hour telling me about this amazing cocktail bar that they went to in New York, or this really cool little yoga studio they went to. And so I learned that, you know, recommendations are all about status. So when they're making recommendations to me, it's all about them signaling their lifestyle status to me. And so we knew that, and that was one of our principles. And so again, that went into the product development. So whatever we built had to be a very beautiful visual representation of your lifestyle status. And if we did that well, then people would make lots of recommendations, and that's exactly what happens. Like in our community, almost everyone who joins Posse makes 5 recommendations of shops. And I don't think there's any other site that's kind of managed to get people en masse to make that many recommendations. So just quickly, the next couple of things we did was we really defined our market very clearly. So we knew that when we were looking at designing this product, first of all, I got a hold of artists to come up with pictures, and then we took them out to everyone we knew and found out what everyone loved and everyone hated, and there was just no consensus. And so I knew that we really had to define our market, but I wanted it to be a niche market, but I wanted it to be a really big niche market. And so we worked out these different user personas, and they were all different groups. So there's like a Laura group, Nim group, an Amber group, Victoria group, and a Ron group, and we've defined kind of the behaviours of all these different people. And then we got representatives from each group, and we tested all of our designs and our decisions on these different 5 personas, and we still use those representatives of these groups today. And then we started doing, and we also did user stories. So we knew who the people were that were going to use the product, and we could test our design and our branding on them. And then we used like all of that information to start thinking through how they would use the product, where they would be when they use the product. And that's how we designed, I guess, the product, the brand, and the strategy. Then there's a process of constant iteration. So the interesting thing is the underlying principles that we spent all that time on at the beginning haven't changed at all, but lots of the implementations changed. So the user experience, all that stuff. You know, we release new code to production every single day. We use a test twice a week. So we're constantly evolving the product, but I think, you can't just, I wouldn't recommend going out with something just very basic and not doing that research to get the fundamentals of your product right and your idea right before you actually start. The other thing we got right the second time around was the sales process, and I hadn't thought about that the first time around. So, we really designed, before we started, this very seamless way of onboarding a shop. So at the moment, if you go onto Posse and you recommend a shop that's not on our database yet, we've got a whole team of vanilla. Someone will call that shop and say, hey, we've got great news for you. Nikki loves you. She's just recommended you as one of her favorite places in the world. This is what she said. It's always really nice. And then we say, do you want to join so Posse can recommend you to her friends? And we convert 95% of the shops people recommend. We then get the owner's details. We set them up with their own dashboard. We make them a little hand-drawn storefront. And that whole process costs us $2.50. And so we've, through that process, signed up now 55,000 shops from around the world. And then we can engage with them. The more we engage with them, then eventually we get them to pay something. But yeah, so really focusing on making sure that we had that sales process kind of down right from the very beginning has been key to getting it working. Technology, I'm just going to go through the slides, but this is just my story of being a non-techie trying to build a tech product. First of all, I had a terrible outsourcing experience, and I really try and stay away from outsourcing as much as you possibly can. Then I tried hiring developers from Seek without, I knew nothing about development. I just hired people that had degrees and sounded like they knew what they were talking about. And they built our site. So the second time around, it was also a disaster. It was really buggy, they were really slow. I didn't know, what I was doing, so I couldn't really criticize them, but I just had a sense that it wasn't right. And so I was very lucky. I met Lars Rasmussen, who has a halo on him, who's one of the founders of Google Maps. He was at Tech 23 as a panelist. I just rolled up to him at lunchtime and said, hey, my name's Rebecca, I've got this idea, would you have coffee with me? And he said yes, and then we ended up becoming friends, and he gave me a whole lot of advice. I said, would you meet my engineers? And he said, yeah, and then he told me, you've got to sack all your engineers. And then he introduced me to this guy from who was one of his developers at Google, Alex North, and then Alex built our entire development team again from scratch. So I think the key thing for me as a non-tech person trying to build a tech company is just find one person who you really trust who can help you. And it doesn't have to be a co-founder, it can be an advisor, it can just be, you just need that one person who has worked at Google or has, has some kind of pedigree that you know that they know what they're talking about and they'll help you build your team. Last thing I just wanted to cover is raising capital. So this is where I raised my first capital from. I actually went and applied to a whole lot of different groups, and there's more now than there was back then. But Sydney Angels, Innovation Bay, and Tech23, I just signed up online as everyone else does, and I got in, and then I presented there. I think a key thing is, before you go and do any of those things, just learn how to speak in public a little bit. Like, I've never spoken in public since I was at high school. I was terrified, but I went and spent $250 and I did a Toastmasters course over 8 weeks. And it was just at the end of those 8 weeks, I was just a lot more confident standing in front of a room of people. And then when I got up at Tech23, no, I wasn't by any means a great public speaker, but I was just, I didn't spend my whole time being terrified about being on stage. I was able to focus on my presentation. Whereas there was a lot of engineer types there, and they had ideas that were way better than mine, and they'd made a lot more progress than me, but they just weren't able to articulate. We won the day with it just not a particularly good product. So I just would really emphasize, like, if you're going to do those types of events are great ways to start building your network. But yeah, put a bit of effort into learning how to present first. Then after I did those events, I went out and I pitched over 1,000 times. So I've literally pitched, I don't actually have lost track on how many times I pitched this now, but there's several years where I was doing 2 or 3 pitches a day. So there was a lot of no's, and it was just evolving the pitch every day, noticing what resonated, noticing what didn't, and then changing the PowerPoint and whatever. Like, eventually you do enough pitches, you get there. So I started with these events. Some people from those events ended up investing. They introduced me to friends, they introduced me to friends, they introduced me to friends. Everywhere I went, I asked for more introductions. And then that was how I built the whole network. We ended up with, I was pretty lucky to find a few industry leaders. So Lars, obviously, he came on board, joined the board, invested. He introduced me to a bunch of other people. Bill Ty, who's famous for being one of the seed investors in Twitter. And then Ken Goldman, more recently, who's the global CFO of Yahoo, all came in, and they also, just those names, made a huge difference to helping me close the rest of the round. There was a whole lot of people who weren't as well known as that, but they were all like, oh, those guys are in, then it must be good. So I think, yeah, focusing on finding a few of those key people that are well known in the space to back you, that makes a huge difference for everybody else. And in the end, we raised around about $5 million. So lastly, just the interesting challenges that we face as women in the space. I actually think overall, probably it's easier for us than for guys. I mean, like Nikki and Jen and I think we've been in the press way more than guys who probably have similar sized companies to us. We're just because we're different, right? So I think that it does make you stand out. But there are some challenges. So this is a photo I took the other night. It's not a great photo, but I was just at an investor event, and I just looked around the room and I was like, oh my God, I'm the only woman in this room. And so I just took a photo. But I remember my first pitch at Sydney Angels. First of all, Sydney Angels hold their events at a gentleman's club, which is ridiculous. And I remember I walked in there and I was trying to run, I was late, and I ran in there and I ran up the stairs, and the receptionist goes, oh no, you can't use the stairs, you can't use the stairs. It's a gentleman's club, you have to use, women are only allowed the elevator. So it was just ridiculous. And then I looked around the room, and there was only one other woman in the room. There was one investor, and out of the room of about 80 people. So it's just not enough women investors out there. Now we have about 60 individual investors and not one woman in the whole group. And recently I went out and did another fundraising round and went to the finance industry, and I did about 50 meetings. And of the 50 meetings, there was one woman in one of the meetings. So it's just, you won't encounter women in the investor community. And I think I'm passionate about this problem because this is what's actually causing the problem in our larger company boards. because you can't just try and fix that problem by putting a quota in place. As startups, we get our boards from our investor base. So all of the early stage companies get their directors from their investors, and if there's no women investors getting involved in early stage companies, then they're not getting the experience on the boards of the early stage companies. And therefore, when those companies become big, that's why we don't have enough women on our larger company boards. Anyway, that's my little rant about that. This is just another photo that I took recently. I spoke at the Google Developer Day, and I just looked out at the auditorium of about 300 people. I was like, oh my God, are there any girls here? And there wasn't. I couldn't spot one, so I took a photo and asked my friends on Facebook to try and find one in the room, and there wasn't one. So yeah, all your engineers are likely to be men as well. And I think just being surrounded by men all the time, the challenge is that you don't get the emotional support that you might want. So originally, when I started out, I really didn't have any friends in the space. And all my investors were guys, all my engineers were guys, and I just had a very different relationship with them all. So I didn't get invited to any of the engineering parties that they had, their weird little coding parties and things. and the investors, I think if I was a guy, they probably would have invited me to the pub or to golf or whatever, but being a girl, I didn't get invited to those kind of things. So I felt quite lonely. But now I have a bunch like me and Jodie from Trees of Prey and Mel. We're a very close little group. So I think just finding a few women or just even close friends that you can go through this with really makes a huge difference, or at least it has for me. So just lastly, this is Posse today. So we now have about 55,000 merchants, about 250,000 users. It's a really engaged network. We've kind of put all of our focus onto building this network of shop owners and shoppers. And we knew that if we could get a scalable network that interacts with each other and we're very engaged, we'll be able to put other things through that network. So you'll see, in the coming months, we'll be adding a whole lot of different things to the product. Anything that you can imagine going between shop owners and shoppers, you'll start to see that turning up in Posse. Thanks.
Just a 2-second break. So amongst yourselves, feel free to get another drink, and we'll be back in 2 seconds. Okay guys, take a seat. Do Nikki's intro and then we'll go straight into the panel. I apologize if I'm a little buzzed. I was talking to Jen, and I had a champagne glass, and it just never got empty. She kept refilling it, so I've had a little bit. Anyway, my name is Nikki. I was the founder of 99 Dresses. We were an app that allowed women to trade fashion with each other online using a virtual currency. And my startup failed, which doesn't sounds a bit macabre, but
Maybe spin up a little bit.
yeah.
It's good. Yeah, it's good.
Try. I like heels. Yeah, so my startup actually didn't work out. So I'm going to come at this from a slightly different perspective from Rebecca and Jen, who are obviously doing really well, which is great. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot from failing. And actually, my startup failed very, very publicly. I wrote a blog post about it the day I decided to shut everything down. And within 48 hours, it was shared with 250,000 people. It was translated into multiple languages, syndicated all across the Australian press, so everyone knew. You know, and it was a really interesting experience, I think, because it's not a topic that is talked about a lot. And just to give you an idea about, you know, I wasn't planning on going through like a story of the whole journey like these two did, but I'll give you a little bit of background. So I started 99 Dresses when I was a very naive 18-year-old. Day I finished high school, I had this idea, and you know, I was just solving a problem that I had, which was I had a closet full of clothes but nothing to wear. And I ended up outsourcing initially. I had no idea what I was doing, like none. I didn't even know what a startup was. But I just was like, you know, screw it, let's do it, and I did. And it got a lot of traction in Australia, but there are reasons with the business model that it wouldn't quite work out here, and I went through a really, really down period. I was on the verge of failing then. This is like 2011. Met an awesome mentor, Matt Barry from freelance.com, who became a really good friend. He was like, you know what, you should go and apply for Y Combinator over in the US, which is only the most hardest to get into kind of like most prestigious startup accelerator in the world. And I was like, okay. So I applied with a guy I'd been working with as a co-founder. A week before we found out if we were going to interview, my co-founder got very, very ill, was admitted to hospital with a really serious illness and had to drop out of the company. And then got an invitation that said, see you in America in 10 days for your interview at YC. And I was like, shit, I don't have a co-founder. I was freaking out. But I found one actually through my network. I met this guy, was like, I really need someone to come to America with me. And he was like, cool. So it was kind of like shotgun wedding, which I would not advise at all, but it kind of, you know, I had to do it in that situation because if the startup stayed in Australia, it wouldn't have worked out. Went through Y Combinator. So I went from this massive low up to this massive high of YC, working like in Silicon Valley. It's like startup mecca. It was like so cool. We were living and working together for 5 months. We graduated on demo day in YC. We were one of the most, you know, hyped up, hottest companies coming out of there. We're named like best startup by like Robert Scoble, and it was really, really exciting. And then within like 5 days, I had a lead investor with $500,000 committed. Went and rounded up a seed round, $1.2 million. I was on top of the world. I was like, yes, finally, like I came from rock bottom. Like I was on the verge of giving this company up, and I got there, and I was really excited. And I got the deal signed, and then I headed back to Australia. And 3 days before the money was set to hit the bank, my co-founders told me they were leaving the company, and they just pretty much upped and left and gave me no warning about it. And you know, to be fair, there were things that I probably could have communicated some things better, but at the end of the day, they just ditched me. And yeah, it was devastating. I had to ring up my lead investor. They dropped off. Well, investors started dropping off. Like everything that I worked so hard for was just falling to pieces. And I was stuck back in Australia as a single non-tech founder with no team, lost the product because they built it. They made sure they told me they were leaving after I reimbursed them tens of thousands of dollars for the entire trip. You know, I was devastated. And I had to start all over again, pretty much. And I did. And I ended up meeting an awesome tech founder, co-founder, March, and he came on board. We had to relaunch our product. We rebuilt it for mobile. I ran into massive visa issues. I was stuck back in Australia for 18 months. I dropped out of university, so I didn't have a degree, so I couldn't get a visa to the US without getting an O1, which is very, very difficult. So massive visa issues. Finally, achieved my dream of moving to New York, which was just massive for me. We get over there, we relaunch this product. It goes really well. Like, you know, we had thousands of girls using this site. They were trading items. We saved tons and tons of items from landfill. Just the most loyal, excited community. And that's kind of what really gets my blood pumping. I love that. And, you know, we go through this massive high again until, you know, we needed to raise some more money. And I was pulling together this round, and kind of at the last minute, the lead investor pulled out. And I just couldn't raise the extra money in time, and the whole thing tanked. It was like 4 or 5 years, I think, of just hard work and a lot of lessons, and it didn't work out. And you know what? That's fine. It's emotional, but sorry, I still get emotional about it. Sorry. It's really tough. Sorry. It's embarrassing.
We've all been there.
Anyway,
You got this. You got that.
And I wrote a blog post, and it was pretty much detailing, I don't know, there was some kind of frustration as well with the startup culture. And this is something that you'll notice if you're getting into startups, is everyone is always killing it. Like all the time, you ask anyone how their startup's doing, oh, we're killing it, we just signed this contract and this and hired this person and everything. And a lot of companies, yes, they do that, but under the bonnet, there's shit happening that no one really knows about. And I think I wrote this blog post, and it was just raw, and it was very honest. And I think that's kind of why it resonated with people. And I had thousands of entrepreneurs reaching out saying, thank fucking God someone talked about it. Like, no one talks about it. And so I guess like that's kind of why I'm talking with you guys today about it, because I just wanted to kind of pass on a few things that I learned from that experience. So I guess the first one is that the media paints startups as this really, really glamorous thing. Like you watch The Social Network and it's like, oh, they persevered, they persevered, they persevered. And they came out on top at the end, and it was this glorious thing. And actually, if you listen to some interviews with the startup founders, there's this interview with, what's his name, Dustin, who was one of the co-founders. And the person doing, like the interviewer says, oh, what's it feel like having an overnight success like that? And Dustin goes, if you mean by overnight, 6 years of every night staying up coding overnight, then I'd say really stressful and really tiring. And it's so true. Like the media, they'll look at success stories and they're kind of like, overnight success, oh look how glorious this is, and oh, startups are so sexy. And it's kind of become a bit of a cult, I think, a little bit. I mean, I'm talking especially in America. This is a perspective from America. And I'll tell you now, I'm sure Rebecca and Jen would kind of agree with this, but owning a startup is like being punched in the face repeatedly and learning to love the feeling of it. I was actually having a meeting with a guy who contacted me, just like one of the guys who contacted me after my blog post, and we met up before this event, and he just got back from Berlin. He'd raised, I think, a few $1 million, and his startup hadn't worked out. And we were just kind of trading war stories, and he's like, yeah, my definition of a startup is learning to chew on glass and love the taste of your own blood. And I know that sounds really macabre, but it's true, and that's just the harsh reality. And I'm not saying that to discourage anyone, because honestly, I don't regret a second of my journey, but I think people get into this and they kind of expect it to be easy, because that's what the media paints it, and it's not. It is so hard. So that's one thing. And I think kind of it all comes down to perspective as well. Like my perspective on this whole journey really is that this is just a blip in my career. Like my company failed when I was 22. It was like 3 months ago. I'm now 23. I'm really young. Like all my friends are just getting out of university. I started this when I was very young. I was very naive. I had no idea what I was doing. Since then, I've built, been able to raise money and like build a network and kind of like a bit of a name for myself. And if you guys are thinking about joining a startup or starting one yourself, I get a lot of people who talk to me and they're like, I'm just so scared about failing and like, what if I lose it all? And that's just a matter of perspective, right? So the way I see it is like, yeah, this startup didn't work out, but everything that I learned is gonna kind of take me forward to the next one. And it's all just like, you just need to zoom out a little bit. Instead of me saying, oh, my company failed, it's like, well, that didn't work out. And I just need to zoom out and look at my life kind of in a more macro perspective. And I think that also applies to like your perspective on risk. So my perspective on risk was always like I get journalists all the time, they're like, oh, you're so brave, Nikki, like starting a startup and taking so much risk. And I'm like, dude, I'm 19, 20, like what risk? I don't, if I fail, I live with my parents. It's embarrassing, but it's not the end of the world. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have a husband. I don't have kids. Like I'm a lucky one. The people I have a lot of respect for are the ones who have husbands and kids and wives and mortgages and and if they screw it up, they're out on the street. They still take the risks, and I have a lot of respect for those people. So especially if you're like young, and even if you're not young, like now is just a really good time to do it, and you'll learn so much about yourself. So I think the biggest risk is not doing it, and that was always my view. I think kind of another lesson is that it's really important to manage your own headspace, and this is something that I don't think is talked about much in entrepreneurship. Again, it's this culture of you go to a networking event, it's like, how's your startup doing? Oh yeah, it's doing well, and this and that and that. And so everyone walks around thinking that, you know, if something's not going right in their business, that it's just them. It's really, really isolating. And you will go through like the highest highs and then like the lowest lows. Like I remember going through periods where I was just depressed. I didn't want to get out of bed. It was really, really rough. And I think it made me a lot stronger person because of that. And what I realized that after going through that really young, like the first few years when bad things would happen, they would knock me out for a few weeks. I could just get really, like, wasn't sure how to kind of get out of this slump. And then when 99 Dresses actually failed, I came home and my mom was like, oh, I'm really happy. I thought you were going to be an emotional wreck. And actually I wasn't, like I was still emotional about it, but I kind of became a lot more emotionally resilient by going through all of those ups and downs. So even if it doesn't work out, like you will become such like a stronger person and be able to overcome those obstacles. And a really good thing for managing your headspace is like getting involved in the community. Like Fish Brothers is amazing. You meet like-minded people. I made sure, like, you know, Pandora is one of my best friends and she's very entrepreneurial, and her boyfriend Bryce, and like we hang out all the time and just talk, and I can kind of share a lot of things with them because we're really close, and it's really great to have that kind of support. And then in New York, me and some friends put together a group of female entrepreneurs, which is now grown to like hundreds of girls. And we do brunches every weekend. So we bring our laptops and we have like New York brunch, and then we work all afternoon. And you can kind of like share things and we talk about our challenges and everything. And I think just kind of having that support network is really important. And it's not really something that's talked about a lot. And just finally, and I don't want this to sound bitter because it's not, but this is just a lesson I learned with 99 Dresses. And this is probably one of the hardest lessons that I learned, was that just because you see a big problem doesn't mean that you should stop, like it will make a good business to solve it. And that was just, you know, it took me 4 years to figure that out. And I don't have time to go into all the details about why I realized that about 99 Dresses, but it was kind of like when you're in the thick of things, like my visa was tied to being like in New York pretty much. My visa was tied to 99 Dresses. I had employees, you know, with kids and wives, and you know, you have like all of this responsibility. I had investors and everything. And you don't want to look at your business and say, oh, I've tried all these things and, you know, like, actually, it's just not a good business model. And I was kind of, I think, in a bit of denial about that at the end. And so I'm really glad that I failed. Like, honestly, I'm glad that it stopped when it did. And it was just kind of chance, like, you know, the investor pulled out. And the last minute, I couldn't find someone else at the right time, and that's just how it happened. But I'm really glad it happened that way. And so I think I'm about to write an essay about this and publish it as well. But I think there's a really big difference between stopping and quitting. So quitting, I feel, is when, you know, you're going along and it's just too hard. Like, you still believe in it, but it's just too hard. You come up against obstacles and you quit. And that, you know, I wouldn't encourage. But stopping, I think, is very smart. And so stopping is when you work on your business model, you work on your business, and you realize that that model or that business just is not a good business, and you stop and you move on to something more productive. And it's really, really, really hard to do when you have all this mass associated with your business. Like, it's really hard to admit to yourself. And one of my investors said, he kind of talked to me the day before we decided to shut down. He said, Nikki, like, you can have two businesses that are exactly the same. Sorry, you can have two entrepreneurs that are exactly the same. They're working on two separate businesses. Business one is in a good market with a good business model, and business two is in a not so good market or has a not so good business model. And they will work the same, they work their butts off, they overcome all the obstacles, they go and they go and they go and they go. And the second business is not in a good market, it's not going to go anywhere. And that's kind of, you know, it's a harsh lesson to realize, and it's something that I've become a lot better at. Realizing now, like when I assess opportunities, I can kind of like look at a whole bunch of opportunities and say like, yes, that's going to be a much better business than this one. Because when I started 99 Dresses, I was 18, I was fresh out of high school, I didn't know what a startup was, didn't think about like, you know, business models and scalability and unit economics and all that. I was just like, that's still no problem. And I did. And in reality, like thousands of women used it. Like when we had to shut down 99 Dresses, our community was so upset that they were like trying to like organize with themselves. They're like, okay girls, who has like investor contacts? And then they're like, oh Nikki, you have all our credit cards on file, just like charge us a monthly fee. And like they were like, oh Nikki, can we do a crowdfunding campaign for you? Like they tried so hard. And I think a really, really hard lesson for me was that like 99 Dresses, we saved a lot of clothes from landfill, we made a lot of people happy. But at the end of the day, we live in a capitalist society, you raise money from investors, you've got to give them a return. And it just was not a good moneymaker. So that's just like some food for thought when you're like looking at different opportunities. If you're not experienced with that, I would actually say like, go to a mentor, someone who has kind of had a few businesses, and they'll probably have like a much better eye for it, and just get them to rip your business model to shreds. My mentor did, and I kind of was like, no, like, we'll figure it out. And I kind of like went with it anyway. And then I circled back kind of when it went down and realized that some of the things, not all of them, but some of them that he said were very, very true. And I probably could have saved a lot of time if I just listened. But yeah, I think that's it. Cool. Thank
you for that, Nikki. I just want to do a quick survey, a show of hands. Who here has cried at work or cried in a meeting or run to the loos to cry while at work? Yeah, thank you. So you're all human. I think a lot of us girls in IT give ourselves a lot of flack because, oh, we've got to act more like men, we've got to be tough, we've got to do this. But we're us, we have emotions, and it shows that we really care about what we're doing if we're showing those emotions. So everyone's human. Anyway, let's go into the panel. So Jen, Rebecca, Nikki, come up here, and I think Pandora is going to act as moderator and come around and ask our questions.
Who wants to ask first? Hi, Jen. That was really good, all of you. Thank you so much.
Sorry, you want to share 2 mics.
Oh, all right. That wasn't it. Sorry. I don't really know that much about the startup community just from being friends with Pandora and knowing Nikki and George. But I'm kind of interested from a gendered perspective. Basically what I've gathered from the community, from the kind of community, is that there's a massive focus on community, and success is really about building relationships, and you kind of all alluded to that in your talks today. How much have you felt challenged by being women? How much support do you feel that maybe other men in the startup industry may or may not be willing to give you as a woman? Do you think that there's any kind of preference there?
Actually, a few days ago, I published a blog post on this, but also went viral. I know it's quite popular with women because basically my take on this is that, I mean, being a woman has a lot of advantages, perhaps for the wrong reasons. Like, you're a novelty to the media. I was kind of strung up as this poster child in Australia when I first started because I was young and female. And it's a lot of pressure, like, honestly, because I had massive imposter syndrome. I'm like, I'm not that cool, like, but so I think one of the big problems with being a female in tech, I think, is the way we're portrayed by the media. So we're treated as a bit of a novelty. And then I'll give you an example. So after that blog post went viral, sorry, my startup failed, I got a call from Business Insider, you know, decent sized business. They get like a lot of viewers, especially in the US. And they're like, oh, can we interview you on failure? And I was kind of feeling really worn out about the whole thing. I'm like, okay, cool. I want to spread the message while I can. And they ring me up, and there's a chick, and she interviews me, and she says, oh, yes, so actually I wanted to talk about the women tech issue. And to give you context, my blog post is about a 20-minute read. There is one paragraph in there that alludes to a few slightly sexist incidents when I'm trying to raise money. But it's like nothing debilitating. The reason my startup failed was like a combination of my poor decisions, bad luck and bad timing. It was nothing to do with sexism. But she wants to talk about that. And so I answered her questions. And then she publishes a blog post that pretty much portrays me as a whiny little girl blaming men for victimizing me, not giving me money for my silly little fashion business. And that made me really mad, because it's like, we're not victims here. And the way we're portrayed as victims, it does not help the issue at all. Like, the media will take something and then they just skew it and make it into this sensationalist piece. So if anyone was to read that without reading my blog post, they'd probably be like, she's blaming, you know, men for her problems, which was not the case at all. And then after that, sorry, this is a long answer, but after that I had a TV network in New York ring me up and like, we want to interview you as well on failure. So I'm like, okay. And I go in and do the pre-interview, and they're like, we want to talk about that article on Business Insider. And I said, yes. The media needs to stop portraying women as whinging, because it's not constructive, and we're not victims, and it does nothing to like help the issue. And then these women are like, yes, totally agree, good. And then I get on air, like live, whatever, the microphone all hooked up and everything. And they're like, oh, so we're with Nikki Duncan, and she's worked in the tech industry, and her message to women is, stop whinging. And I gave it to them on air. I was like, that is not my message at all. And that's just a taste of kind of like, you know, how the media skews things. They don't help the issue at all. I'm done talking to reporters about that issue. I'm sick of being called a woman in tech. Like, I'm just in tech. Like, why am I a woman in tech? What's my gender got to do with anything? And actually, the Australian startup scene, I don't feel like I've been discriminated against or anything. It's a lot worse in New York. Like, the stories, especially my friends, like, it's more sexual harassment. Like, there, it's pretty bad. But I think a big issue is just the subtle things. Like, I've had friends who have actually, you know, gone into investor meetings and pretty much turned out that all the investor wanted was a date. Or like they'll try and put the hand on the knee and like just, you know, and for me, I've experienced a lot more subtle things. Like, I had a guy come up to me in my co-working space, and I was working there on a Saturday, and he's like, oh, how does he get you to work so hard? And I was like, what do you mean? It's my startup. He's like, oh, I just assumed he was the founder, and he points at Martin's desk, and he's the only guy on my team in that office. And he just makes an assumption that, you know, he's a guy, he must be the founder, and then all the like girls kind of like are kind of the employees. And so I think kind of as women, like, you just need to be aware of that, and it's more like the subtle things, and just kind of keep marching. I don't think you have to be quite pragmatic about it as a startup founder. It's not a whole lot you can do, and speak out if you want to. It's not always pragmatic to do it, but that's always been my attitude. I'm sorry for like hogging the mic. Jesus.
I was like a massive rant I went on the other day. I got really like, no, worked up about it.
Great, thanks for all of us. No, in all seriousness, do you mind if I respond to this?
Oh, okay.
I guess in my experience, I'm part of a public company called Programs, right? And they're a labour hire, all men, pretty much, in the management team. So being a sort of 23-year-old, kind of sitting on the round table, and that's our board. I'm the only female on our board, but I do have to, you know, I completely appreciate there are complete incidences like that, and you need to draw the line, but when there are fantastic positive instances, you need to celebrate it. So we have a team who, you know, Chris Sutherland, who is the founder, or sorry, the managing director of programs has a daughter, is so pro, you know, how are you going to get out there? How are you going to train yourself? How are you going to be better than everybody else out there? So, you know, personal development strategies going great. Come shadow me for a week. I'm running all these businesses. How are you going to be better and better at what you do? And how are you going to learn from what you're doing today to be even better again? And look, yes, there's 3/4 of our business are men, and it just happened that way. It's not like I'm sitting there going, sorry, you're a female, no, you're a guy, let's go. It's who applies, who's right for the role. And it just kind of morphs into that direction, especially in the tech industry, which is unfortunate, especially in this situation. But I think there are people out there who are finding out the right situation, especially in Australia, and especially trying to push women out there in the best possible way and train and develop, especially younger female people who are trying to do startups. And I think the ones who are out there doing it need to be celebrated and congratulated on doing what they're doing. And you know, we need to start those communities, especially.
It's very much kind of like did anyone watch the Emma Watson talks? It's like he for she. It's like I know like my co-founder is like the most amazing guy, and he pretty much worked with women all day and then went home and had a daughter and a wife, was surrounded by women, and you know, I know plenty, like my team, like guys as well, like most people are fantastic, and I think it's just important as well to celebrate that and just be aware that you might be treated a little differently. And I think the best thing to do is just keep marching, like keep going and kick ass, like I don't, you know, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that it is different, so I'd be lying if I said that it wasn't any different. I think you've got to be aware of the advantages and the disadvantages, and there are some disadvantages, so celebrate the advantages that you have. I think the disadvantages for me probably were lack of emotional support, just being surrounded by men all the time. I think men do treat you differently, particularly older, like I think maybe our peers don't, but particularly older men, if you're surrounded by older investors, and a lot of them are very well-meaning, but they'll treat you like a daughter, and you know, try and give you advice, and you know, you can form kind of bonds quite quickly. And, you know, they really want to help you, but it actually, if you turn around and you don't take their advice, I found that those relationships kind of explode. So like, it's true, they do treat you like a. One of my mentors very early on, I had having kind of this confusing relationship with the director, and she said, some older men, not all, but some will treat younger women like either a wife or a daughter, and they only have 2 settings for women, and they'll either slot you into one of those roles. And so I was like, right, okay. And then you meet someone, you can tell in the first minute or so, he's relating to me like I'm a daughter. And so I've learned to avoid doing business with people who treat you put you in either of those 2 roles, because those relationships, they always end badly. And a couple of other things that I found are disadvantages. One is just the way that I react to the emotional roller coaster is different. So when I get really tired and I'm getting pounded by a board, a guy in that situation I think would tend to lash out and like get angry and kind of fight back. Whereas I'm wired differently. I cry, and I did sit in the board meeting once and cried, and my board they were all pounding me, and they looked at me like they had no idea what to do next. So it's like a broker or something. So I've learned to really try and suppress my emotions, because I think crying is really not appropriate, even though that's being angry is fine. And the third thing I guess is I just don't get feedback. You don't always get honest feedback. So guys that go out and pitch, I've heard the conversations that they have with investors, and they'll say, that was the worst pitch I've ever heard, and they'll give them really brutal feedback, whereas no one ever talks to me like that, and I'm sure that it's because I'm a woman. So I think, it'd be nice to get honest feedback sometimes. So they're the disadvantages. The advantages are like, the media stuff, I think it's great for us. I mean, definitely, that's in the angel story I told before. I was one of the only women in the room, and yes, I did raise money, and I'm sure that being a woman probably helped me because I stood out. So I think, you've got to use all the what advantages we have. We've got to use them.
Yeah, I had a similar fundraising experience in Silicon Valley, especially during Y Combinator demo day. There were 63 companies, so 200 and something founders. 7 of us were women. And yeah, I think being a woman definitely had its advantages, because if you think about it, a lot of women are solving problems that they identify with themselves, and if they're identifying with it, it's unlikely that your stereotypical kind of, Silicon Valley programmer or whatever is going to identify with that. And so there's kind of like a lot of less, I think, a less competition on ideas like that. You approach it from a unique perspective. You have like a unique perspective being a woman, which is really good. And so I actually think, you know, there's so much opportunity for women to especially like solve all kinds of problems, but especially like with fundraising. I think the investors are really excited about having like a really good team with like women on it who could then go and like execute and solve problems that aren't so intuitive to the majority of the population, which are men. Yeah. Questions?
Whoever wants to answer this, that's fine. How did you guys build credibility as one of the sort of outliers in the industry?
We're still building credibility. I mean, every day we're trying to go, hey, we're here, we're a legitimate business, promise. Like, that's every day of every business. I think that's what it's like as a startup. It's continuously trying to prove that you're not trying, like, it's going to sound ridiculous, but you'll get phone calls and call centers saying, what happens if you steal my credit card details? What are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to go to an island. I'm going to buy lots of cocktails. I'm really going to enjoy myself and no one's going to arrest me. You go, seriously? That's never going to happen. You know, there's insurances, there's all that. Like, you should invest in getting the right service for yourself or your business. And it's amazing what people's imaginations will allow them to kind of run away with, let's put it that way. But I think every day, no matter what stage of your business is at, you're continuously trying to prove where you're at, that you're a legitimate business and that your reputation is good, it's quality, and that you're trying to prove that, you know, your business is where it can provide a quality service for the customer. And I think everyone's experiencing that no matter what stage of the business is at.
I think in terms of your business, I mean, Jen said, plus I'd say having a, but yeah, it's hard. It must be hard for you because you're actually taking people's credit card details. So you've really got to focus on building credibility. I think, you know, ways to do that is having a website which looks, I mean, it's all very good having a minimum viable product, but having something that looks trustworthy. If you're going to be asking people to enter their credit cards in, I mean, I use Genside and I felt like it.
Did you hand over your credit card details?
I think I did, yes. And I felt like it was, no, but that experience, I remember that sign up, I remember that sign up experience was really good and it was very simple and it felt like this is a legitimate site. This is not like some watchy person's put this together in their bedroom. This feels like a serious business. So I think making sure that your website feels like, yeah, credible. I think press also makes a big difference. Just, you know, it's very easy to get in Sydney Morning Herald or whatever, like, they're desperate for stuff with PRW. I mean, it's really easy to get articles. And then you get links at the bottom of your website, you put the logos on. All that kind of stuff just helps you build credibility. And also, I think for myself, I put a lot of effort early on into starting a blog. And I started writing, you know, about my journey. Every week I would write a lesson that I learned. And I started building a profile on social media. And I kind of was like, am I wasting my time doing all this? But I really enjoyed it, so I kept doing it. But that actually has made a huge difference in terms of helping me meet lots of investors who actually contacted me from the blog. And then, you know, getting speaking engagements and stuff, and then, you know, going into big deals with corporate partners, they kind of have heard of you before they, you know, you walk in there, and that makes it, you know, that actually does make a big difference in terms of building your own credibility.
I agree with all of those points. I think also, I mean, for me, a huge thing, especially in Silicon Valley, was the Y Combinator card because it was so hard to get into. I felt like in Silicon Valley, no one really gives a shit about you unless your company is growing like really, really fast, and or like you've got some big name attached to you or something, and it's very like hype driven, I think, and so for me, I noticed like I'd be talking to people and like they don't seem that interested, and then they find out that, you know, we went through Y Combinator, and suddenly like everyone wants to like talk to you, and so I think, I don't know, as weird as that is, like, but attaching yourself, or if you can attach yourself to credible people in the industry. So like one of my mentors is Matt Barry, who's like a really good friend of mine and helped me so much. Like he was my Yoda pretty much. But you know, like having kind of like really credible people, people leading you, and that kind of shows investors that, oh, like that person's not going to waste his time on someone who's you know, like not serious or whatever. So I think that helps as well.
Hi. So a lot of you spoke about how you utilized a mentor, and I'm wondering, how did you meet these mentors? How do you sign them on as a mentor? Do you call them mentor? Like, how do you kind of have that official agreement? Like, you can come to me whenever you want when you have an issue or a question.
Okay. So with Matt, for instance, I knew this was like pretty much 99 Dresses wasn't in a good place in Australia. We really need to do something about it. And I'd seen Matt around like on the kind of, you know, doing the startup events and whatever, and he ran a really big marketplace, and I had a lot of respect for him, but honestly, I thought he was so scary. He's awesome, but like scary. And I just walked up to him at an event and said, Matt, you know, you run a great marketplace. I need some help with my marketplace, and can I take you to dinner, please? And he kind of brushed it off at first and whatever. And then it was really funny because it turns out, this was an event in Melbourne. Turns out that we live 5 minutes away from each other in Double Bay. Still pressure. No, it was really weird. And I lived there for years, he lived there for years, we'd never run into each other. Suddenly, I'd be at Woolworths, he's there buying cat food. Everywhere I went, he was there, and it became this kind of like, have you stopped? Anyway, so eventually we ended up like, I said, look, can we just go to dinner? And since then we became like really, really good friends. And honestly, a lot of the mentoring was like quite informal. Like we just kind of like go out for drinks, go out partying, and then kind of like slur advice. Like, no, it was pretty much like we'd hang out and have a good time, hang out with friends in groups and stuff, and we just end up having conversations. And it wasn't really like a really formal, like, oh, let's sit down and have a meeting kind of thing. It was very much a kind of informal, we're friends, and he was helping me with my business. And yeah, like that's how it worked for me with him.
Mine's similar to that, but a little bit different in the fact that I think everyone can be a mentor per se. I walk into a room going, I don't know anything. How can I learn from everyone else here? So Nikki, I'm sitting here going, wow, okay, what can I learn from you? Rebecca, what can I learn from you tonight? So even with my staff, it's right. Everybody's here hired to be an expert in their particular department. How can I learn from them? I'm not the expert in sales. I'm not the expert at development or marketing or whatever. This is the problem. How are we going to fix this quickly and cheaply? Let's go. And I think that's important no matter what industry you're in. And if you can find those mentors who will spend that time on you and your business, it's fantastic and invaluable. And I think you've experienced that in particular. So, Rebecca, what would you say your experience is as the commentator?
I mean, same actually. I think from what you said, Jen, like probably the people I've had the most best advice from have been my own team members. So I think looking to everyone that you meet as someone who can give you advice and what can you learn from everyone is a great way to great outlook. When I started Posse, I went out and tried to find advisors, and I actually found it really, really easy to get advice. Always people wanting to be mentors, and it turned out that they were all the wrong people because I got lots of bad advice from people who worked at telcos and music companies, people who really had nothing to know anything about really startups or what my journey was going to look like. So I really made an effort to learn to find the right people who had been through the right types of experiences. And now I have kind of two sets of mentors. I have mentors that help me in a particular area. So someone like Lars, who is the Google Maps guy, I've just rolled up to him at Tech23 because I had a problem with technology. And now I spoke to him this morning on Skype, and he is helping me recruit. We're recruiting a new VP of engineering. And so he's giving us a whole lot of advice on, whether this person is the right candidate or not, and what to look for and what to ask them. So, and he's also, everything to do with the architecture of our product. So it's all like Lars is my tech go-to guy. And then I have another guy who is an investor who is an expert salesperson. He's built huge sales teams and also a massive call center. So he helped me set up my whole Manila team and my whole sales process. So when I have a sales question, he's my go-to guy. So yeah, I have mentors for specific problems, and then I have personal mentors. And that's just one person now, to be honest. I mean, I've Naomi Simpson from Red Balloon. who I go to when it's a gender-related thing because she's been through similar things and she's a woman. But in terms of just my own, I think it's important to have one person who doesn't just care about your business, who's maybe not a shareholder or investor, and not someone who just likes, there's a big difference between people who like to be mentors and hear themselves give advice, which is a lot of people, and people who actually, really care about you and your business and your career and your health and everything. And so I'm very lucky that I found he's not a well-known name, but in probably this group, but yeah, he's very well-known globally for what he does. Incredible support person for me, and has my whole career in mind, not just Posse. So yeah, it's finding that one person has made a big difference for me.
I just had a question about team. I know all three of you have really good teams, and Jen, you spoke a bit about the importance of culture, having a really important culture in your team. What are your tips for getting a good team?
I think in a team, like the way I interview is literally, first interview is, how are you going? Who are you? What are you doing? Can we be friends? Silly as that sounds, it's, when you get married, it's you look for someone who you can go through the worst times and the best times with, right? So it's trying to create that same sort of relationship. Because personality can't be trained, but skill sets can. So getting people in who are as passionate as you are about the business, about where you're going, where you're heading, what you're trying to do, and when it's 3 a.m. and the site crashes and you're having a complete meltdown, that you've got 6 other people with you going, oh my God, how do we fix this, right? Rather than, I'm out, have fun, see you later. It's having the right attitude of people who are around you and also the right skill sets who can actually enable your business, and celebrating their wins every time that they achieve something new and can develop themselves and grow in the business.
It took me a while to kind of find the right team. I went through people who kind of left me a little burned. Like I didn't after those co-founders left, and I had a hard time trusting anyone. I got quite lucky with Much, and then I think who came on as a co-founder. But I think for me, cultural fit is obviously very, very important. I remember I had a girl once, and she seemed really cool in the interview, but when she kind of started working with us, we had a culture of lots of jokes and very kind of quick-witted banter happening all the time, and we were kind of known in the co-working spaces, we were the loud kind of funny team. And this girl, I don't know, it just kind of, the jokes went straight over her head, and it wasn't that we were trying to exclude her, but I had a chat with her and how are you going? Because I noticed something was a bit off, and she's like, honestly, I feel like I just don't fit in. And it was actually just because we were trying to include her, but our sense of humor and our the way we communicate with each other and the language we spoke, it just wasn't her. And so although she was kind of, fine work-wise, culturally just wasn't a good fit. And so we she got another opportunity, and I said, go do that. And so I think culture is really important, and also just hiring for consistency and reliability. I will take consistency and reliability and attitude any day over skill set, any day. I've worked with people who were super, brilliant, so smart, but they just weren't reliable in their execution. For instance, I worked with an iOS developer named Oz, who was on my team, and I was hiring for a position in Sydney, and he applied for tech, and I was like, whoa, it's kind of looking for someone in Sydney. I didn't want to do this back and forth offshore thing. And he was actually the best person for the job, and the reason I hired him and worked with him for years was because he was the most consistent, reliable developer that he didn't need to be with us, in the office. And every day, clockwork, he was on there working. Every day we get a release, every day, like clockwork, and consistency and reliability. And definitely hire for that over and above skill.
I guess in terms of culture, what these guys both said, it's all about the people that the team culture will be determined by the people that you put in the team. So getting that right is fundamental to it. I think just some specific things that we did. So after we ran out of money last year, and we were kind of at rock bottom, we were kind of, I had some investors that were interested, but we hadn't closed anything, and the people had left and they had been replaced. And everybody knew that we were kind of really struggling. And I knew that I had to rebuild the culture, and before we were actually gonna, we were never gonna get back up and actually close our round and get the product moving again unless I could fix the culture. So I kind of really focused on culture first and took my effort off just doing fundraising, investor meeting after investor meeting, and really focused on getting the team motivated again. And we had to do that when we had no money. So, and we were working out of a garage as well, because we moved out of our nice office into a horrible little garage where we had no natural light and it was freezing, which is awful. But it's all very romantic when you look back on it now. It was horrible at the time. And I remember the one thing I did was I decided we should have breakfast together as a team every day. And so I could afford to do that. So I just bought like nice cereal and bread and stuff, and every morning, and everyone was coming in at 10 o'clock as well. So everyone's coming in late and leaving early. So I was like, I can't say, okay, everyone has to be in at 9 o'clock because that would just kill the culture. So I thought instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try putting on breakfast at 9 o'clock. It's like everyone come and have breakfast and we'll talk about what we're doing. And so we had this little area upstairs in the office where we all had breakfast together every morning at 9 o'clock, and we talked about what we were working on, and we just started building our team culture again. And that actually was the start of kind of us rebuilding. And then we did raise our money. And as soon as we raised our rounds, like that day, I moved out of that office and found a really, much nicer, still not particularly expensive, but a really nice office. And we made it look awesome. And just that environment made a huge difference. And now everyone comes in really early and stays really late because it's an environment they like to be in. And then we just did, we have an offsite every 3 months. So I take the whole team away to the Blue Mountains or Hunter Valley or somewhere, rent a house for 2 nights. It's actually really cheap to do. We put on food, we all eat together, we brainstorm the company, it's an awesome bonding experience. And then the other thing that we do is we have games every Friday afternoon. It sounds really daggy, but at 5:30 on Fridays, everyone's actually, I was finding people were still working at 6:30 on Friday night. I was just like, this is a bit of a downer, to go to the weekend. So at 5:30 we stop and we play like Taboo or some stupid game. Everyone has a couple of drinks and it's just really a fun way to end the week. So just a couple of those things you can do as a startup. You don't have the budgets to take everyone away on ski trips or anything, but you can do these little things which make a huge difference.
I was just wondering, so I kind of want to know what, I guess, gets you to where you are, or what you think maybe sets you apart from other people who, a lot of people are out there working on different startups, but I guess what sort of maybe things that you do set you apart, or maybe you can explain to us an average day at your company or when you were working in your company. I think that would be, is there any sort of rituals you do or different things that might set you apart?
To be honest, I'm up at 6 a.m. Trying to catch up on emails from overseas and kind of get on top of the day, because apparently I'm behind the times because of the time delay, right? And then get into the office. I'm there at about 7:30, harassing Henry by 8 o'clock, so thank you, Henry, in the sales team saying, what on earth is going on? How are we going? Where are we at? Personally, I try to spend as much time in every department as possible because you don't really know what's going on unless you've been there rolling your sleeves up and giving it a go. I think especially in the sales department, you're really not going to know the pitch and what's working, what's not working for your clients unless you're in there living and breathing it and making sales pitches yourself. I guess then after that, it's maybe 5 o'clock, the call center finishes up, and so it's ping pong, it's very serious, and if you laugh right now, we'll actually give I suppose the respect that Henry's looking for right now, so it's not hard. And then after that, we will, I guess, hit the laptops again, keep running. Our dev team starts a little bit late, maybe 9:30, 10 as well, and then it's till about 9 p.m. at night. But I think the culture we've established is, if it needs to be done, it needs to be done. Why waste another day waiting for it to be done? Because we're all sitting around waiting for things to be done, then we're going to be as slow as everybody else in the marketplace. So I know it, really disrupt and run fast and all those kind of buzzwords that everyone's throwing around these days. You've got to live and breathe it. And if you're not the first person at the forefront running that show and expecting others to do it, then it's never going to happen.
It's a funny thing about, you think being your own boss is you can come in, you can come whenever you want, you can leave whenever you want, no one's telling you what to do, but it's totally the opposite, right? Everyone, if you're not the first person in and the last person out, everyone will follow you, everyone copies you. So So yeah, you have to, it ends up being a lot more work. Yeah, I guess in terms of my day, it's probably similar. I mean, I think something I have learned. Something I have learned is that, and I'm a little bit older than you guys, I'm in my 30s, you guys are so young, it's amazing. This is my second business, so I have had to, I can't go from 7 in the morning till 9 at night every day. I just can't do it. I mean, I'd love to be able to do it. It's not like I want to work-life balance. I'm totally happy to work all the time because I love what I'm doing, but there's actually a limit to what you can do. So I think I've learned I have to go running in the morning or do yoga. I have to, yeah, or you know, like the last few days I've had events on at night, or I've had something on at night and something on every morning. Tomorrow I'm in Melbourne, so like 12 o'clock today I ran out and went into a yoga class. It's just like trying to keep with a little bit of that balance, just to keep yourself like sane and that you can continue to be as productive as you want to be. Because if you just burn it all the time, then I find that I'm just not as sharp and not as productive as I need to be.
Yeah, I think burnout's a big issue, especially when you're doing a startup, and it's kind of like I would burn myself out, and then you could just tell like my energy levels were lower because I don't know, like even when I tried to take a holiday or I try to take time off, I'm just like consumed. But like my mind just does, like it wouldn't switch off. I'm like, okay, just like relax, and I'd be sitting beside a pool thinking about what my next strategic move would be. And so I think kind of towards the end of my 90s, I was just so tired. Like I'm currently, I don't even live in Sydney at the moment. Like I'm living down in Barrie, so like in the middle of nowhere. It's just green and lush, and like to put into context that how relaxing my life is at the moment. Like I think 3 days ago was the first time I had to wear a bra. Like, so, like that's my definition of relaxation. And so burnout's a big issue. Just kind of be conscious of it, and like if you can do, like take breaks. Don't go do like sprints, but don't go like full force all the time. That was a mistake I probably made. And then yeah, so I think that's kind of like, I had another point, I forgot what it was, probably too much champagne, but yeah.
Anyone else with a question? Sorry.
I'm wondering, so Nikki had a few different co-founders, and it sounds like the other ladies, you're the #1 co-founder. So I'm wondering what, Nikki, made you feel like you needed a co-founder, and to the other ladies, what makes you so confident that you don't need a counterpart?
So I went through a few different things. I outsourced first. Okay. I outsourced first. Did not work out. I think I had a similar experience as Rebecca. It got me off the ground, but it wasn't a great utilization of. Oh yeah. Okay. Anyway, so it didn't work out. And then I hired a guy. He was young and very smart, and very good coder, but not as consistent and as reliable as he should have been. And then I wanted to get into Y Combinator, and they don't really consider you unless you've got co-founders. So that was kind of like where that all came into effect. And also, if I had that YC card, I could probably get co-founders on board, because it's a lot easier to then. But I happened to get co-founders who were on board for the wrong reasons, i.e. they wanted to do Y Combinator and not necessarily were in it for the long haul. And I love the experience of having co-founders. Like, it's really great to have that experience and have kind of someone you can rely on. But what I realized was that after that I kind of wanted a hybrid of both, because I've been working on 99 Dresses. It was my baby, and at the end of the day, I like to call the shots. And so with Marchin, who I brought on board, he first came on board. He wasn't a co-founder. I hired him actually as an employee, and then after a year, we moved to New York. And he moved to New York. He's with like a 3-month-old child. He moved his wife there. He pretty much paid to move all his furniture and everything. Like, it was an expensive exercise. He had stuck it out, like, through thick and thin. And I was like, you know what? He is a co-founder material, and he earns it. And it wasn't a big deal for me labeling him that, but it meant so much to him to be like the co-founder. And like when I talked about him in the press, he was my co-founder. And I think it also helps like from a fundraising point of view for me as well. If you're non-technical and you have, like for him, he's like mid-30s, senior developer, knows what he's doing. And if you have people like that, like respecting you, it kind of, and willing to kind of like, you know, be a co-founder, I found that I kind of got more credibility with investors doing that. So yeah.
From my personal experience, it was really just about finding the right people around me and creating that ownership for them. So finding the right CTO who feels like he's as involved in it or is as stressed as I am every day, or finding that marketing manager or whatever. So my whole process was, what do I have in my day? How much can I palm off to somebody else in the nicest sense possible so that I can take on something new to continue to grow the business? I think every day it's about creating that sort of ownership in the business, no matter what level you're at in the business, so that everyone is driving towards the same goal. We have monthly meetings and weekly meetings depending on what team you're in, but it's all about everyone knowing exactly where the business is going and having that much, I guess, passion and desire to get it there, and knowing why we need to get there as clear as possible wherever you are in the business.
Okay, so I've had a few experiences with co-founders. I actually started this business with a co-founder and it turned out to be useless. So co-founders, so two founders falling out is the number one reason why startups fail. So that's you don't want to go into a business with a co-founder unless you're really sure that it's going to work out. You've done all your homework, we've done some work with them before. The thing that I wish I had done with my co-founder is I had the idea, we were both going to work on it. I was going to be more of a founder, but I was going to have more shares than him. But the way that we worked it out is we had breakfast, and he said, "What are you thinking in terms of our shareholding?" And I got a napkin at the breakfast table, and I wrote 70-30 on it and then that was how we divided the company. And so 2 months later, he wasn't involved anymore because he had enough. We both had businesses. I gave up my business. He didn't give up his business. I was doing it full time, and I was stuck with this guy that had 30% of the company. It still has it today, or been diluted a lot now, but it still has a major chunk of the company and is not at all involved. And that's sort of I chose to. I could either be really angry about this and throw my toys away or whatever, or else I could just choose to deal with it and move on and say that's a lesson. I won't do that next time. So I would suggest if you are going into a relationship with a co-founder, your shares, you should write it on the back of a napkin. So shares should vest over a period of time. So just like employee shares vest, you say, okay, we're going to split this company 70-30, and in 4 years' time we'll end up with those shares. But if you leave before then, so say you leave in a year's time, you get 25% of those shares. And so they vest over time. So if somebody ducks out, then you're both protected from each other doing that. And one person kind of has the control. Then I was by myself for a long time as a solo founder, and I thought it was the downside of it is it's very lonely. So you spend I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley and traveling around doing investor meetings. Sometimes they'll go really well, and I'll be like, great, and then I'll go back to my hotel by myself and read a book or something. It's not that fun. And if it was going really badly and I was sitting in the park crying, I had no one to talk to, really. No one really cared like I did. So yeah, it's much more fun, I think, having a co-founder and who you can bounce things off. And the interesting thing with me is that now I'm actually about to bring in another an equal co-founder to the business. So we're going to announce something soon, which will mean that I have another co-founder. We've been working together for the last 5 months, and we both in the past built successful businesses, so we have similar work. We both have strong work ethic, which is one thing to really look for. Make sure that you're both going to put the same amount into it, because people fall out when one person's doing all the work and the other person's slack. And then we both have the same vision for the company, and we have complementary skills. So that's actually working really well, and it's so much more fun, and we're getting a lot more done because we're able to play to our strengths. So I think if you find the right person, it can be awesome. But yeah, certainly I got to learn a lot by being a sole founder and having to go through everything by myself. So
I've got a few tips I like to so one thing Paul Graham from Y Combinator told me after my co-founders left, and he said, so first I wouldn't advise a shotgun wedding. I kind of needed to do that to get into YC, so I was glad I did that, but if you can at all avoid the situation, do it. Another thing is, you don't know what someone's like until you see them under pressure. So everything's great during the honeymoon period, and then like you can get a sense for it, but you really honestly don't know their character until you see like their integrity and how they perform under pressure. And you're under pressure a lot in a startup. And so like Marchand, for instance, really proved himself, like even in the last days of 99 Dresses, like he was, you know, just like hanging in there. And I was expecting him to be like, sorry, Nick, I really need to get a job. Like I've got a wife and a kid to support. And he was like, no, let's kind of like keep going. And so, you know, look for like the character of someone. The second thing, like Rebecca said, vesting has saved me so many times, like vest everything all the time, do not vest. So vesting's really good. But sorry, one thing that Paul Graham told me was, he said, Nikki, you can't have two Steve Jobs in the business. You need a Steve Jobs and you need a Steve Woz. And by that he meant like I was a Steve Jobs. Like you know, it was my baby. I was the one kind of calling the shots, and I needed someone who would kind of complement that and support me, and who was more wanted to be like in the back and kind of he was a co-founder, but he didn't have an ego the size of Jupiter, and that was kind of what the guy who left had, an ego the size of Jupiter. And so like when you like us two together, just from a personality point of view, that was really difficult. And then just like another tip with the legals, and this was a hack that I did. So after those two co-founders left, and I brought on board Marchand, and I said, okay, this is the paperwork. Like I gave him a contract and said, here's your contract, this is what you're getting. But you're going to be signing this formal legal paperwork in 6 months if it works out. So he kind of signed this contract, like his employment contract, that said, if you're still here in 6 months, you're signing like this vesting, like the formal stock like thing, but your vesting starts like now. And the reason I did that was because when I brought these other co-founders on board, you know, I spent all this legal money like getting them written in, you know, like the stock, and that was just a freaking nightmare because of the negotiating everything. And then a few months later, after we spent all this money, oh wait, we have to write them out, and that was more money. And you know how much lawyers cost. And so in order to keep our books really tidy, we had to do that. And so with Marchand, I kind of said, look, none of it matters in the equity thing unless we go and raise like another round or those convertible notes mature, like it doesn't matter. So why would we spend money on it? And like, I just don't want to write you in unless it's a good fit for both of us. And so actually we kind of kept delaying that, and because it was all written down, it was fine. And so we saved ourselves thousands of dollars and just like writing him in, because at the end we failed before we raised extra money, so there was no point writing in because like we would have had like it's worth nothing really anyway. So that was just like a hack that we did, and if you can get someone to agree to that, that's
Come on. I think there's a delay.
Okay, so we wanted to finish up at 8:30, and it is 8:30. Did anyone have any final quick questions, or everything's cool? Correct. Oh, you will have one as well, Chris. That's all right.
Very quick one. I get the impression that this is more than a full-time job.
Really?
So you can call me captain. Where I'm heading with this is that for someone who potentially maybe doesn't have the capacity to do this, 48 hours within the 24 hours kind of thing, how realistic is that to do something, to achieve something when you don't have 100% or 200% to put in, but only, say, I don't know.
I'm thinking of the story of Nikki's sister Alex.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. This is still in the story, but basically she has a full-time job. She started a side business on her own and then sold it off while working a full-time job. So I don't think it's unrealistic to achieve something like that. I think it's just, if you're passionate about it, you'll make time for it. It's just as simple as that. And I think you either need to be 100% in or not, and you'll make it work if you want to make it work.
Yeah, yeah. So that's my sister. She's actually second in charge at Shoko, which is like super fast growing. Like she works there all the time and everything. But at the same time, she went and built. It was just like a side business selling like a really simple product, and she sold it. It wasn't for like millions of dollars, but like she made some revenue and like and she did it. And so I think if you want to do something like that, yeah, you can totally do it on the side. I know people who do that all the time. And I think if you're going to get into like something where you're like raising money and you've got responsibility to like investors and everything, you pretty much have to be fully like full time, because you have to kind of like get the most value you can out of that. And normally also like they won't invest unless you're like fully in there. So I think it also, in this whole culture, like the lifestyle business isn't talked about a lot. And I'll tell you now, like going through this whole experience, a lifestyle business looks really damn good. Like I'm I've had my fun with the whole like venture back there, and it was really fun, and I'd probably do one again later on. But I have friends, like my best mate who moved me to New York. He makes really decent money for a 26-year-old selling products like from his underwear, living in like an apartment. Like just I come back from my day. I'm like, oh hey, like what'd you get up to today? It's like, oh, I woke up at like 10 and like did some stuff for his business and went on a date and took a gymnastics lesson and like went to sleep, and that's pretty much his day. And he's never gonna make like $1 billion from that, but he doesn't have any investors. He doesn't have people like relying on him. He contracts a lot of things out. And I think that like those businesses have a certain place, and we shouldn't necessarily like discount them. And I think you need to look at when you're starting a business, like, what do I want? Do I want to change the world? It's like huge, like high pressure, like those venture backed businesses, like all the time, it's like really high risk, high reward. Or you can do a lifestyle business, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I just wanted to like reiterate that. So.
I think you guys are right.
Oh, great, fantastic. Hope that answers your question, Harry.
All right, well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much, girls. Yes, nights I think I've been to. I think the panel style works really well, and all three of you, yes. This is my secret way of trying to be best friends with you on that. Yeah, all three of you are so different and similar in so many ways, and I think everyone in the audience can relate to all of you in some way or another. So thank you so much for making the time to come tonight, and thank you Fishburners and Pandora for organising such an amazing event. Amazing, and thank you community. This wouldn't be possible without our amazing Girl Geek community. So if you haven't subscribed to us on Facebook, please like us and you'll get info on the next events. The next event is at Atlassian. It's on the 14th of October. And yeah, hopefully see you there. Thank you.